Well, it's been 77 days since House Republicans passed the Secure the Border Act, which would restart construction of the southern border wall, increase the number of Border Patrol agents, and strengthen current laws to protect children from human trafficking. While Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer stalls any Senate action on this bill, chaos at the border continues. Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas appeared on Capitol Hill today testifying before the House Judiciary Committee to defend the Biden administration's record on the border. Tough job. But this testimony comes amidst a growing chorus from many House Republicans for impeachment of the embattled DHS secretary. Joining me now to discuss this and much more, Congresswoman Harriet Hageman. She serves on the House Judiciary Committee and the House Committee on Natural Resources. She represents Wyoming's at-large congressional district. Congresswoman, welcome back to the program. Always great to see you.
Thank you, Tony. It's wonderful to be with you today.
So Secretary Mayorkas appeared before the House Judiciary Committee today and claimed that the Biden administration's approach to the border is working. Your reaction?
He lied. And he lied throughout his testimony today. That was one of the things that I think if folks go and watch the hearing and his testimony, there was an enormous amount of frustration because all he did was dance and deflect and avoid and ignore and try to run out the clock for anyone who was actually attempting to hold him accountable or ask him legitimate questions. It was very frustrating for the Republicans, for anyone who wants to understand what the Department of Homeland Services is doing, what they're doing to protect our borders, to enforce our immigration laws, and to address the incredible human trafficking that we're seeing, the flooding of our country with dangerous drugs such as fentanyl. You could tell, and I sat there for several hours quite close to him since I'm the one who faces him directly or faces the witnesses. And what you could see is that every single response he gave was not to enlighten us, not to educate us, not to educate the American people, not to be held accountable, not to actually describe what was going on, but was to avoid reality and attempt to run out the clock.
Yeah, I watched a good portion of the hearing. In fact, I do see your position right there on the front row, right across from the witness, where the witnesses are seated. There was a lot of focus on the drugs, fentanyl, because it's a huge problem all across the country. But it was a wide range of topics that were addressed today. And one of the topics that was addressed actually came up in your questioning, and that was the Targeted Violence in Terrorism Grant Program. This is about $40 million that comes from the Department of Homeland Security to organizations supposedly to address the issue of terrorism, domestic terrorism. But as you pointed out, this money is being used to target conservatives. Tell us about that.
The money is being used to target conservatives and Christians. So what is happening is we're getting into this doublespeak in this 1984-esque situation because the terminology that is used always sounds so benign or actually positive. And what's ended up happening and what we've been uncovering over the last 7 months is what I would refer to as the censorship industrial complex. And under the Biden administration and Mayorkas and the FBI and the DOJ, they have intended to target conservatives, Republicans, Christians, parents who are concerned about what their children are learning in school, what they're being exposed to. They are attempting to identify them as domestic violent extremists. So they're categorizing people with whom they disagree on policy as somebody that they can then go after and use the full weight of the federal government to punish them, to marginalize them, to stop them from speaking, to take away their First Amendment rights. And that's what I focused on with Mayorkas. His agency, and he was referred to specifically by the judge in the decision issued by the district court out of Louisiana on July 4th, of what his agency has been doing to attempt to suppress the speech of people that the Biden administration disagrees with. This is an incredibly important First Amendment issue, and it's why I focused on it with him. But yes, what it is there's a university that is explaining and training people how to prevent conservatives and Christians from being able to communicate. And so what they're doing is they're lumping Fox News and the Heritage Foundation and a variety of other organizations. They're lumping them together with Nazis and with terrorists. And that way they can marginalize people and make it so that they can't actually engage in the public square.
And we know where that leads because we saw the Southern Poverty Law Center. We were one of the first to make their list of their hate list. And it led to a gunman coming into our building. So it is in shooting one of our people. It's the marginalization so that then people feel free to attack. And this is connected with Antifa. This is connected with the violence of the left. But you're bringing up something very important, Congresswoman Hageman, that I want people to hear is that, you know, we hear about parents being labeled domestic terrorists. We find out that the Biden administration worked with the National School Boards Association to get this letter to the White House to ask for help. And then we see other examples of this where we see an FBI memo coming out of Virginia that is connecting people of Catholic faith with extremism. And so we just get these little bits and pieces here and there. Every now and then one of them pops up. But these are all interconnected. And I think that's what you're saying. This case out of the Fifth Circuit in Louisiana, which the Attorney General of Missouri and Louisiana are pressing forward, shows that underneath the surface, all of these are connected, and Homeland Security is right there in the center.
Well, they absolutely are. And in the lead-in or the introduction to your program today, you were talking about what they're attempting to do in Australia. Australia does not have a comparable law or constitutional provision to what we have in the First Amendment. But I can assure you that what our leaders in the current administration are attempting to do is exactly the same thing. What they're trying to do is they're trying to give all of the power to government, for government to define what is misinformation, what is disinformation, what is malinformation. But what we've been through with COVID-19 as an example, all of the nonsense surrounding the claims and the hysteria associated with so-called global warming. What you do when you empower the government to be the body or the entity that gets to determine what's misinformation is disinformation, is you give them the power to suppress people's ability to communicate and actually debate the issues of the day. If there's anything that COVID-19 has taught us, it's that we cannot trust the government to determine what is misinformation or disinformation or malinformation, which is a new word that they created, that even the federal agencies have said malinformation is information that may be true, but it's troubling or troublesome. Well, that is a dystopian world that we would be living in if we allow the government to have the kind of power where they can say, Harriet Hageman, we disagree with what you say. And despite the First Amendment, because we have defined what you say as misinformation, we're going to block you from being able to say it. You want to talk about giving a totalitarian regime all the power that they need. That's the way that you do it. And that's why I said that I actually thanked Mayorkas today, and I thanked him for being the epitome of the exact tyrant that our forefathers recognized would go into government to attempt to take away our rights. And it is for that reason that they drafted and put in place the very First Amendment to protect our freedom of speech, our freedom of association, our freedom to worship, our freedom of religion, the freedom of the press, the free exercise clause. They did it because they knew that people would always be trying to take our rights away. And so by having those constitutional amendments, as the judge held in the district court in Louisiana, the government cannot do what they've been doing, including the Department of Homeland Security and Mayorkas. And they don't get to label us just so that they can suppress our speech.
I think you would agree we're at a tipping point in our country, and these freedoms that are protected under the law, they have to be used if we're to protect them going forward.
There's no question about that. And the point that so many courts have said throughout history is the answer to troublesome speech, or the answer even to disinformation, is more speech. It's not suppression. But one of the things that the courts have been absolutely unanimous about is that the last entity or the last organization you want to give the power to define what is misinformation is government, whether it's a state government, a federal government, because they're the ones we've seen it. You read the book Franz Kafka's The Trial, you read 1984, you read Animal Farm. Throughout history, we know what happens when government takes control of speech and dictates what we can discuss, because then they dictate what you can think. And at that point, we're right back in the former Soviet Republic. We're in the communist China.
Yeah. Congresswoman Hageman, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you for fighting hard on Capitol Hill.
Thank you.